Welcome to another edition of On Me Sunday Mornings. My name is Julia Dudley Najib, and I'm here with Linus Najib and Eric Payne. And Eric Payne is one of those community members that people are getting ready to, they know your name. It's out there. So we want to be able to talk more about what you do as we talk about what is happening in the community, the news that you need to know. And before we get into the topics of the day, we want to remind you that the California Advocate has their newest issue that is coming out. Definitely check their Facebook page or go to our ONME Facebook page where you can get directly to the California Advocate. Also, every Monday, Valley Black Talk Radio, listen online, vbtradio.org, or at our app.amptv now, where you can listen to Valley Black Talk Radio live. And if you're in the Central Valley area, you can listen to it by going to 88.1 FM KFCF. And Valley Black Talk Radio is on every Monday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. And we will continue to add on to a lot of the local African American media and having those different perspectives like we talked about. You got to stay tuned for when we're going to be having Juanita Stevenson, one of our, I say, seasoned journalists. And you've heard that name, right?
Yes.
And of course, Feather DeWise, Andre Covington, and Ken McCoy. These are faces that you'll be seeing on the On Me coming up soon. And so we hope that you continue to watch On Me Sunday mornings and support, and also watch our online editions. And before we get started, also in the program, we promised that we would read excerpts out of this book. And we were at the African American Museum. Normally, we're at Cafe Aroma during our On Me Sunday mornings. But in honor of Black History Month, we want to celebrate here at the African American Historical and Cultural Museum of the San Joaquin Valley here in Fresno, California. And the book that I talked about that we would be discovering or at least exploring this month is African American History. It's the chronology of African American history. And one of the excerpts that I wanted to pick out and maybe have our co-host, guest host, to be able to comment on. I don't know if you knew this information, but in 1797, January 30th, blacks in North Carolina presented a petition to Congress protesting a state law that required slaves, although freed by their Quaker masters, to be returned to the state and to the status of slavery. This first recorded anti-slavery petition by Negroes was rejected by Congress. Didn't know that. And as we know the history of Quakers, as people think they know the history of Quakers, they usually have a different opinion of what a Quaker was. Often portrayed as the soul helpers and sometimes slave masters so that they would help the slaves, right? But I'm just curious about that excerpt out of this book. And so wanting to know your comments on that. I don't think people know that. Eric?
Well, I just think it's fascinating. Those are probably some of the, when you think of Black History Month, those are some of the things that are blacked out of History Month, and you don't really consider that during that era, that time, that people had a different form of thinking in terms of what freedom meant to them and the quality of life that I think that they were able to experience at that time, and how different it was for them.
And I don't think we realize that, well, it just seems like the slaves are portrayed as kind of docile, don't want to stir the bunch, and yet that was a petition in 1797. You know, we don't take that in consideration.
Yes,
Linus?
when I was thinking about it was, as Eric stated, our thinking was altered. We wasn't at that time looked at as a human being. So to them, going back to slavery and developing the laws to encapsulate the slaves was more or less to the benefit of our slave master. So, of course, they.
But what do you think about the Quaker? And when you guys think of Quakers, and I know we're looking at the oatmeal box and that image, what is the image that is portrayed, at least even today in society, when we look at the history of just the Quaker?
When I look at the Quaker, when I look at the box, I never knew as a kid growing up looking at the Quaker oat box at that time. I just thought it was some godly or good person, so to speak. It wasn't nothing that would disseminate somebody being something negative or something bad, in particular to my race or my culture. So that's...
So, and that's the part, you know, that is hidden, that we don't hear about in the history. I didn't learn about that in school. Only thing I learned about were the Quakers that helped slaves, or that they were slave masters to help their slaves, but I don't read that, and when I read that excerpt, that's not what I see. That's not what I read into that.
Yeah. Now, what were you thinking?
Well, I was shocked when I read that excerpt, and I was able to pick that right away. And my image was, okay, for me, the image of a Quaker was someone that was trying to help slaves during the time period. Also, it was the Quaker that was speaking up for the slaves and fighting for the rights of slaves. And even when you read Frederick Douglass and some of the other slave memoirs, it's very prominent. And so that's the only thing I've ever heard or read about or was given that information in school. Nothing really negative. We have to read into those things. Those are the things that we have to teach our youth, our next generation.
Yeah. Definitely agree.
Yeah. So that's the excerpt. Didn't want to spend too much time in the excerpt because there's going to be so much that we need to talk about. And as we do, we always talk about some of the local things that are happening in the African American community and hearing our perspective on that. And I think one of the issues you wanted to bring up, Linus, dealt with businesses, and you wanted to expand on that. And we know that African American businesses, there's always a challenge. It's always an uphill battle. But one of the biggest part of that uphill battle is dealing with quality control and also quantity control. And I wanted you to be able to expand on that.
A lot of times when I go to some of the businesses and ask them about advertising or ask them about their marketing strategy, a lot of them are expecting something for free.
Okay.
That's just bottom line. What can you give me for free? What can I do without paying any money? And I just find that so unreal, and I find that so unfathomable, that they would want something for nothing, and that they don't put a value on our service. In particular, I hear this from many different businesses of color. People, when they deal with other people of color, they want something for free, and that's just not acceptable.
So is it that they want something for free, or do they want it for a discounted rate? And looking at us being business owners, should we be giving them a deal? Is it that because we feel that we're African American business owners that we should up the price on something?
No, my thing.
That's the main complaint.
If something is valuable and is going to be a benefit to my business and to myself and my establishment, I would want to pay for it. If I'm going to benefit and if I'm going to profit from it, I would render that person's of quality service, and I would give them back service rendered in the form of money.
So, Eric, where do you see where the problem lies? Because at the same time, I hear complaints from the consumer who says, well, those prices are a little bit too steep. They always cost more than the average non-African American business owner.
Well, I think that, first of all, I think you need to look at it from a lens of equity.
Okay.
And to know that equity is a superior growth model, and it's an economic imperative for communities. And I think that if we're able to adopt that mindset, that we wouldn't so much be fighting for a crumb, but we would then, as small businesses, be able to come together and band together for a larger piece of the pie.
Okay. And so when we're looking at equity, after the break, let's talk about the issue of equity. Are we equal? And in fact, President Obama, in his State of the Union speech, will touch on those things from a local perspective, talked about that in the American dream. Are we truly equal? You are watching ONME Sunday Mornings. We will be right back after this short break. Honoring America's 2014 Black History Icons, brought to you by Seven Angels Thrift Store and More, 1464 Fresno Street, Fraser Realty on 7643 North Ingram, Suite 105, and Insight Design and Print. I'm a woman who came from the cotton fields of the South. From there, I was promoted to the wash tub, and from there, I promoted myself into the business of manufacturing hair goods and preparations. Don't sit down and wait for the opportunities to come. Get up and make them. Madam C.J. Walker. Madam C.J. Walker was an American entrepreneur and philanthropist regarded as the first female self-made millionaire in America to market a hugely successful line of beauty and hair products for black women. We salute you, Madam C.J. Walker. Also brought to you by Cowboy Joe's Smoke Shop, 1468 Fresno Street, Cafe Aroma Coffee House, 550 North Fulton, and the African American Historical Culture Museum of the San Joaquin Valley, 1857 Fulton Street.
Very exciting news. AMP TV has now partnered with the California Advocate newspaper and Valley Black Talk Radio to bring you ONME, all in one media, one place, one price. Do business with us, you won't regret it. Hey, it's on me.
Welcome back to On Me Sunday Mornings. My name is Julia Dudley Najib, and I am here with co-host Linus Najib and our guest host, Eric Payne. Thank you for coming on our program this Sunday morning. You know, and we want to talk more a little bit about you, Eric, what you do, because I don't think people realize the many hats that you have to wear, and that can be a challenge.
It can be, yeah.
What would you say is the biggest challenge with the hats that you do have to wear?
I think, I serve on the Community College Board of Trustees for our region, and oftentimes it's hard to find your identity in the work that you do as a public servant, but more importantly, the work that you do in the community, which would mean my 9 to 5.
Wow.
So.
And, you know, to be so young and have accomplished so much, and I won't put your age out there. I'll say under 35. Can I say that? Can I say under 30? Okay. So, and no, but because you're so distinguished and your name is already getting out there, and, you know, you've got some letters behind your name, and so it's exciting to see you be the face of the future and of the generation for people to have a role model to look up to, and that part's got to be exciting for you.
It's heavy.
It is heavy, huh?
It's a heavy hat to wear.
Yeah.
But you know, I've really risen to the occasion in terms of being a voice for those constituents that I do serve, and more importantly, being able to understand the community that I was born and raised in, and I think that adds a lot of value to the conversation when you're at the table with policymakers, because you really have an understanding of what the needs are.
And so now that brings us into what President Obama was talking about in his State of the Union speech when he was referring to having young men of color being able to have more advantage, being able to have a little bit more help, and also calling upon the corporations. And the second thing that he touched on is having community colleges to help rebuild people's futures that are trying to go into a field, trying to go into some type of vocational training. And I know that's definitely down the lines of what you deal with in the community and the youth that you serve. Do you think that part of his speech was effective? And how do we bring that to a local level? I do.
I think that like our air traffic system, we need to apply some of the same ideals and mindset that within our education system. So 0% failures and minimize delays. And I think that that's something that can be applicable in terms of our completion rates, in terms of our dropout rates, not only within our community colleges, but within our K-12 system for our boys and young men of color that face those dismal numbers of dropout.
Very dismal.
And I think that if we're able to provide a system that's supportive, where wraparound services are provided to make sure that our students are succeeding, then we're doing our job as a system.
And we've talked about mentorship, Linus, many times on the other programs. And how do you suggest we start actually implementing it and stop talking about it, meaning not us, but the community?
Well, first, I would think we just start at one individual. You know, one person, just take another person, young man or woman, depending on gender, and work with that person one-on-one. And if that one person just do their part, and then the other one person do their part, I think we can see a change.
So, but how do we get people started in that? Because that's telling them just to take one person. What's the step? Are you saying that people should go to the high schools? Are you saying they should go to the big brother, big sister? Do you think they should go to their communities?
No, it's so many of them out there. You can find one person that need help.
So like a neighbor.
He can be a neighbor. It can be someone else's kid. It can be someone that you see at the local high school. Or you can go to the principal and say which kid are the most difficult to manage, and they can give you some recommendation, and you can volunteer. It's only a certain amount of time that we can spend on that particular student or that particular individual that we can mentor and give them guidelines and a map to success.
That map to success sometimes is not usually a direct map or road that even parents can follow, because now we don't have parents involved in some of these kids' lives. And I mean, that's something we're going to have to eventually address.
Yeah.
That's the elephant in the room.
Yeah, and I also think that it goes back to teachers. When teachers who define rigor not by a test, but by an unwillingness to accept mediocrity for our students.
And we look at President Obama and what he's saying and addressing our young people of color, and particularly men. How are we going to address it as a community? It's great to see it. He's recognizing it on a national level, and maybe didn't quite go into it deeper as we all would wish, because I know we're always saying, well, it's a black president, why can't he go on those issues further? And we have heard his response to that. But now he is responding to those problems, and now he is reaching out to the corporations. So what are the suggestions on a national level that can be implemented, and what are some things on a local level here in the Valley that we can begin to generate based on what President Obama is saying?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that are bubbling up that are in the pipeline that are currently being experimented with locally. We have a lot of great programs that have been funded by organizations, local foundations, like our Boys and Men of Color initiative. That's a program that works with young men of color, and they look to address different issues within our public systems, restorative justice, dropout and completion. They've been able to fund Speakers Bureau, where you're able to see those individuals that are doing the work at a higher level and other communities, and we can bring it back to our own. Really engaging the people at a neighborhood level is something that I think that we can continue to work on and improve with our messaging and how it should be done. Because at the end of the day, you're the best teacher for your child, and those are things that we need to look at in terms of supporting the whole family, because there are a lot of things.
We really do have to do that.
Yeah, there are a lot of areas where families are not complete. You have single parents out there, single moms,
and young moms.
Yes, young moms that are doing the day to day, in addition to working, going to school, and raising a family. So those are things that we need to look at as well.
Those one-parent families, we have to begin to address
Well,
that.
a lot of them put their kids in front of a computer game while they doing their dishes or while they working. So the kids are spending hours and hours and hours just on the computer, not on a computer game, but on a video game. So hours have been wasted on that child instead of reading a book like traditionally they did before. They all on the cell phones.
But there's so
now.
much competition, like what you just said, the cell phone.
Yeah, the cell
You have
phones, the
the
video
digital
games.
books now.
The digital books, games, but it's not. It used to be a time where people can just sit at the table, they have dinner ready, and they can have just normal conversations about what's going on in their lives. What's happening with you in your life? What's happening with you in your life? What's going on that don't happen now? A lot of times they get their food, they sit in front of a television station, or they eat while they playing a video game, or they on the phone in their room, they isolate themselves. So most of the times, a lot of the parents don't even know what's really going on with their kids or their children.
And you've really had a lot of the local nonprofits really step up to the plate.
Yes.
I mean, we're moving out of our those tough times, and our nonprofits have really stepped up to say, hey, we're doing the work. You have organizations like Fresno's Bados Unidos, who work with single parent moms in the Roosevelt community. You have organizations like West Fresno Family Resource Center, who are working to ensure that our families have healthcare coverage. So you have EOC. They're working with our single dads, and partnering.
Finally, a program for the single dads.
Yeah, and partnering with our educational institutions to ensure that the manufacturing certifications that are there, that they're getting those, the apprenticeship programs with our local unions, because we're getting ready for high-speed rail. Those are some of the things that our community needs to be ready for.
So after the break, we still got to talk about the equity, and that was something that was also addressed in President Barack Obama's State of the Union address last week, and we will address that after this short break. You are watching ONME Sunday Mornings. We'll be right back. Honoring America's 2014 Black History Icons, brought to you by Seven Angels Thrift Store and More, 1464 Fresno Street, Fraser Realty on 7643 North Ingram, Suite 105, and Insight Design and Print. I'm a woman who came from the cotton fields of the South. From there, I was promoted to the wash tub, and from there, I promoted myself into the business of manufacturing hair goods and preparations. Don't sit down and wait for the opportunities to come. Get up and make them. Madam C.J. Walker. Madam C.J. Walker was an American entrepreneur and philanthropist regarded as the first female self-made millionaire in America to market a hugely successful line of beauty and hair products for Black women. We salute you, Madam C.J. Walker. Also brought to you by Cowboy Joe's Smoke Shop, 1468 Fresno Street, Cafe Aroma Coffee House, 550 North Fulton, and the African American Historical Culture Museum of the San Joaquin Valley, 1857 Fulton Street. And we are back. You are watching ONME Sunday Mornings. My name is Julia Dudley Najib. I'm here with co-host Linus Najib and our guest host, Eric Payne. And we've been talking about President Barack Obama's State of the Union address and how it relates to us on a local level. I want to talk about the equity value when we're talking about the American dream. And we want it to relate to everyone because we're here in America. Well, I'm going to bring this up, the Coca-Cola commercial that's getting a lot of feedback because this was a commercial that was played during the Super Bowl, and people were angry because it was in the different languages. That in itself is not an equity that we're looking at. We're talking about cultural aspects because America is made of this big melting pot, ironically. Some of us here by choice, some of us not, as we know who. And so when we look at how society views these values, I'm concerned about societal values maybe taking I'm looking for the right words of what I want to say, but the values that society has created and the ones that we're going by and suggesting that it's wrong to have different cultures represented in this commercial as an example. I don't think there's equity value just in that alone. I don't think that's a good example and good representation to say that we are not honoring us as Americans. I think it's saying just the opposite. I think that's showing hate.
Well, I think what that commercial did is it's allowed us to have those courageous conversations. It's allowed us to really take a step back and look at some of the perspectives that we didn't think would necessarily be a response to something like that in the innocence of a commercial. But it helps us to have that dialogue in terms of how do we progress as a country in terms of equity. What are the things that we value and the moral turpitude that exists within these conversations.
Well, I mean, Linus, would you say that that particular commercial doesn't not represent the American dream? And the irony of it is that Americans got mad because it was in different languages, yet those people were Americans?
I liked the commercial myself. I didn't see anything that was offensive. I think it was more admirable and honorable that they will allow different cultures to have a platform with traditional Coca-Cola, which has been around for a long time, to expose each and every one of the Americans' language in appreciation of the American dream. Here.
So you do see that commercial embracing all the cultures here in America.
Yes, I felt it. When I saw it for the first time, I thought it was like, oh, that's cool. And then they went into another language, then it went to another language, even though I didn't understand each one. But I thought it was very appreciative.
But it was still singing the national, I mean, it was still America Beautiful. We know that song.
Yeah, but I thought it was a progress. I thought we was making progress. I said, oh, that's great. And then they did it around the Super Bowl, which is the most expensive and the most national coverage.
Like $4 million for 30-second.
Yeah, $4 million. Oh, yeah. So that shows, I take my hat off to Coca-Cola for presenting that, and that's a step forward.
But do either of you see a bigger issue here that people had a problem with the commercial? That's where I saw an issue. That's where I'm seeing where are our societal values when we're looking at the equitable American culture. Are we really showing that tolerance? I feel like that's showing intolerance.
We're afraid of change. You know, when slavery, white colonists were so used to slavery, they was afraid of change. And that Coca-Cola commercial was a sign of a change. That's something that they've never seen before. There's something that's different.
But it's always been here. You know what I mean? America's been this big melting pot forever.
Yeah, but to see it on a national televised and representing Coca-Cola, that's never been done before. So that Coca-Cola was successful in getting the controversy and getting a lot of people to conversate on that. So they was very successful in that campaign.
And they still stand behind that. Eric, would you stand behind that?
Yeah, if I'm going to deliver a product and it's something that I believe in and it's something that I'm putting forth for other people to receive, I'm going to continue to stand behind that product. And for them, it was branding. They were reaching out to a cross-cultural society to say that this product that we're able to offer, this is something for the American people. And in terms of what our America looks like, it's changing. And so we need to be able to communicate to those communities.
And that's the reality that we have to address. Being able to communicate with everyone. And I still think that's a problem when we're looking at even the political system and political culture we have here. Now that brings me to the American dream. Coca-Cola commercial represented that American dream. Is everyone honestly able to get to the American dream, though? Is that part? I feel like that's where the equity splits for me. When I'm looking at people that look like me, that is where everything changes. When we're talking about access to capital and you're talking about access in general, all of that changes for me. Linus?
Well, when I think about access to capital, I was just thinking, especially for the African American community, I cannot call my uncle or my cousin or my grandmother or anything, I'm speaking to me personally, and say, I have this business plan, can you help me with $50,000 or can there be some kind of investment? No, most people, especially in our community, are barely surviving financially, and most cases on a government assistance type program. Our homes and our families has been tremendously broken up. Not one of us in our community have someone that's haven't been into the prison system. So when they come out of that system, they have to start back from scratch again. So we looking at if anything is equitable or we have access to certain resources. I think it's not geared so much in our community as much.
Eric,
That's just my
for the
opinion.
small business, and especially in this community, do they have equal access, in your opinion?
I think our small businesses have the ability to succeed, but I think oftentimes they're locked out of the opportunity to succeed.
Okay. What about African American businesses in particular?
Yes, I think that challenges do exist there, and I think we need to really, how can we all come to terms and come to the table to have those conversations with some of our major institutions in our region to ensure that we're looking at it from an equitable lens in terms of the services and goods that many small businesses within communities of color have to offer.
And so I guess we should also talk about the other issue after the break, that we're talking about maybe microfunding and some of those things that have tried to be a tool where corporations or other entities have wanted to give to the community, and yet there doesn't seem to be one entity or one organization in the Black community that they can trust or be able to put money in the hands of where it gets to the right people. Let's talk about that after the break. You are watching ONME Sunday Mornings. We will be right back.
African Americans buying power, 8% of Fresno County. ONME is the one agency where you can find out what people watch, what they read, and what they listen to. Check out ONME. Get connected to African Americans in the 21st century. Now there's a virtual card for you to scan the QR code and get access to ONME, Valley Black Talk Radio, the California Advocate, and AMP TV, all in one spot, based on the 21st century. Get connected.
Welcome back to ONME Sunday Mornings. My name is Julia Dudley Najib. I'm here with co-host Lennis Najib and guest host Eric Payne. We've been talking about equity. We've been talking about President Barack Obama, who's going to be here this upcoming week, so I'm told. We sure hope to be there. Don't leave us out. I'm just saying, Black media always gets left out. And we've been talking about having access and is there really American dream? And I really didn't get to state my opinion on that, but I do feel like there is a challenge, myself being a small business and having to go through that rut of trying to get access to funding and some of the challenges that we have gone through. And had it not been for friends that have stepped in that are already in those higher places, it would have been difficult. It's not like I have a family member I can go to and say, hey, can you lend me about $100,000, just $100,000? I'll give it back to you in 10 years. But the reality is we don't have that as readily available when it comes to funding. So bringing up the funding issue is we've had our community, I'll just talk about this particular community, I can't speak for throughout the valley, where there has been those challenges. Lennis?
Well, I want to bring into a story of Robert Johnson, the former owner of BET.
Okay.
And he announces everywhere, he says this quote, had it not been for that investor that gave me, I believe about $270,000 for 20% of his company, we would not have known about BET. He mentioned also he would have gave him 80% of his company for that access to capital. And that was a crucial injection into his business to make BET what BET
Having
is
that
today.
capital.
Having that capital. Now, a few years later, he sold it for billions of dollars, approximately
Only billions.
$3 to $4 billion of dollars. Now, for the guy that put $270,000 into it at 20%, he got a lot of money, over $200 million. So that's a classic example how access to capital will help any small business get to that next level. Without it, it's like having to run without food, or having to drive to LA without gas.
Yeah.
So you can have a Mercedes Benz or a Bentley and be top quality, but it's completely worthless if you're trying to go to LA if you only have a quarter of a tank.
Well, this is so ironic, and Eric, you know that we have a $1.3 trillion buying power in our black community. So is it ironic that a lot of black businesses, I want to say, are broke or having to really operate on a shoestring budget and either don't know about investing or don't understand the value of that, being able to give a part of their company away?
Yeah, I think that it's detrimental to a community that doesn't have access to capital. I think you create a lot of barriers there. I think there are opportunities for communities to do lending to small minority businesses within communities of color, and I think as long as some of those walls and some of those barriers exist there, it's going to continue to be challenging, and I think small businesses will continue to suffer unless there's a reform within our system.
And small businesses, as you both know, are usually the ones that help to decrease that unemployment rate because they're the ones that are hiring.
One of the factors is when you go out for a loan, they ask ridiculous questions. How much income are you bringing in per month?
Well, it's not ridiculous if you are in business.
Yeah,
it's only ridiculous if you're a startup.
Well, if you're a startup, you're not making any money up front. You can't show revenue if you're trying to have capital to start it up. So they have little blocks that prevent us from having access to the capital in order for us to get going, in order for us to create the jobs, in order for us to be successful and be an example and help other members in our community create jobs.
Well, then that brings me to my next point that I'll comment on, where microfunding has been, well, we've had several opportunities to be able to do that here in the Valley. I think the challenge has been being able to have that trusting organization that can provide that access to the capital in order to do the microfunding. And I think microfunding is an important element. I feel that our communities cannot live without it. Somewhere we've got to build trust in our community.
More or less, you're saying having an incubator?
Yeah, having a defined incubator where people do not feel like they are threatened, where egos are not hurt because they're not in charge. Because I feel like that's hindering us not having it. And I know we all want to be in charge, but we all can't be chiefs. Someone's got to be able to let up and let someone lead, but at the same time, we do need something to help us bring that together. What do you think it's going to take to bring that together? What is it going to take for us to be able to come together and say, let's work on this microfunding. Let's make sure all these businesses are funding. Let's make sure you have what you need for AMPTV. Let's say, Eric's got his company that's up and coming. Let's make sure you have what you need for what you're doing. What's it going to take?
Well, in my opinion, it's going to take a whole bunch of businesses in similar situations coming together and mapping out a plan of action. And maybe where some other communities do, to where all of them would pull their resources together and help this one idea flourish. And once this one is up and running, then this capital help another idea flourish. And now you got two. Now the two combined will help the other third one flourish. And that's kind of their way of doing it. Now, in the black community, of course, sometimes we have so much division, so much separatism, so much distrust. We have to find a way to get through those barriers and work together to look at a bigger picture, because it's not just about access to capital, and it's not just about money that another individual makes. It's about all of us coming out of this bucket or this barrel so we can show success, because that's where it starts with at the small business level. And the small business eventually become mid-sized business, eventually become large corporation. Every corporation somewhere had to start at a beginning at a small business level. So we have to come together and work and get some smart businesses established so we can help the community at large.
Right. But I also think it's going to take an educational awareness.
There you go. That's what I'm looking for.
To establish some of those metrics in terms of how that process is done.
And I think that's the key. Educational, having the background to give everyone, to give them understanding. First of all, I think some of those key things would be making sure everyone's going to get a piece. They all know that everyone's involved. Also, how the process works. I think that's going to be essential. And helping people to understand that just because a person's in charge of those funds doesn't mean that they hold the purse strings. I think it should be where when you have an incubator, it's either a board or a committee that works in being able to disperse those funds. It's not just funneled through that one person and they only get to decide. Now, in the past, in this community, that has happened. And I think that created a structure where I'm the chief and I'm in charge, so I'm going to give you this a little bit whenever I want to.
Well, if they
that
have,
didn't work.
Well, if they have criterias and if they have a set program set,
But it doesn't matter if it's just that one individual in charge and they have a set criterion. It doesn't matter if they're the ones in charge of those purse strings. It has to be a committee. It has to be something worked with everyone
if you have a
involved.
committee that's worked with everyone involved and you have those criterias combining. Let's say, for example, we have someone come in and say, okay, they don't have a business plan. Well, you can't submit anything. You have to have a business plan. You have to have projections. You have to have some skin in the game. In other words, what have you put in of your own money? You have to have some kind of standards that has to be reached.
I think even before microfunding, you got to go back to educational awareness, what Eric is talking about.
Yes, I agree with
Because now
that.
we have people that don't even operate on those auspices because you've dealt with businesses where they don't have a business plan or projections.
They
or
don't
anything
even
like
have
that.
a logo, some of them.
Right.
So they don't have a logo, they don't have a website, they don't have, they haven't put any money into it, but they only have an idea. Well, we have to find out where, at what stage are they at where we can accept them, and not just we, but a group of people that can accept them, and then they got to go get passed, and every member have to pass it in order for them to get access to a certain
But I still think there's
amount
another
of
side
funds.
of the coin, Eric. I still feel like these small businesses think that they are up there. They think they are in business. They think they don't need those tools or they bypass it. It's like that part needs to be, it's okay if that part's skipped.
Yeah, I think we need to offer maybe like an innovation
Yeah.
fund where there are some discretionary resources, and we can begin to look at some of the industries like ag technology that we can invest in that can support our region.
I like that.
How incubation through some of the technology initiatives around small business or education that allow for almost like a trial and error that I think would be beneficial towards.
And that's a good point. And, I remember even Tate Hill, the Fresno Metro Black Chamber of Commerce, said a lot of the smaller black businesses fail because they don't have that funding where, discretionary funding where if you make a mistake, you can still go forward, or they're having to use whatever profit comes in to be able to handle from supply, demand, and then they don't have anything for themselves. There's nothing left over, nothing. And there's nothing to give them any cushion. And like he says, if someone has a bill that's due tomorrow, 48-hour notice, giving them funding in 30 days just doesn't help. It doesn't do the trick. And I think that's the challenge that we're up against. At least that's what I see in this valley. And myself being a small business owner, I've seen it and, experienced it, and those are some of the challenges we're up against.
Some of the businesses out there, you see them, they open today and they be in business for a certain amount of time and then they close. And then you wonder what happened to them. And you have to ask, what did happen to them?
Or why didn't I support them also? How could I have supported
Well,
them?
you could say why didn't you support them or what happened. It can be any number of reasons. But right now, why these businesses are closing, especially and particularly in the black community, and we looking out there and we say, how many actual black businesses around in the San Joaquin Valley? How many? And how many are financially well doing? One of the idols that I talked to, he was saying, can you find one black business out there that's can give you $50,000. Remember, can give you $50,000 and to support of this channel, and they can have all the channels and access to the commercial time and everything else. And we can't think of one. Let's break that down. Can you think of one that can afford $25,000 for that same right and privilege to get half of a channel? I can't think of one. So we have to be able to have a group like Jay-Z doing New York with P. Diddy and Russell Simmons. They have a collaborative where all of them come together and they make decisions on what's better for their organization. And I think
But you know what? The best
here.
intentions have to be involved with that. I think that's the challenge, at least in the Valley, what I've experienced. Because people have their own values and what they think they need the money for, and then intentions start to go this way. You know, you have to have that mission statement that's for everyone, that's going to be the same thing for everyone.
Okay, I agree.
So after the break, we have a lot more to talk about. We want to talk about those videos that are people think are cute, and we've addressed on it and touched on it a little bit. We got to discuss it because it's getting a little raunchy.
What kind of videos?
The videos where you have the babies that are cussing. We'll talk about it after the break. You are watching ONME Sunday Mornings. We will be right back.
African Americans buying power, 8% of Fresno County. ONME is the one agency where you can find out what people watch, what they read, and what they listen to. Check out ONME.
Welcome back to ONME Sunday Mornings. My name is Julia Dudley Najib. I'm here with co-host Linus Najib, as well as guest host Eric Payne. We've had some lofty discussion. We've talked about businesses. We even talked about President Barack Obama, who's supposed to be here this week, and education. We've gone down the gamut. That's what I love about these roundtable discussions, that you'll be seeing more of with Feather DeWise, Andre Covington, Kim McCoy, and Juanita Stevenson. Very near future, I shall say, very near future. And you have to stay tuned for that to find out. So, Eric, you know, I want to talk about these raunchy videos. We have to address it. Okay. People try to separate themselves from it. We got to discuss it. If it's hitting CNN, why are we not talking about it? And I'm sure we are. And I'm passionate about it because I want to understand, why are parents feeling okay and good about putting their 1-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old to say these bad words and thinking it's cute, and they're uploading it to Facebook, and it's getting millions of hits overnight. Overnight sensation.
Yeah. I think, you know, it's a testament to, one, the impacts that social media has on society. And, you know, you can have your cell phone, you can be recording, and one click away is, you know, millions of viewers on YouTube, our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, some of the more popular social mediums. And it's both a good and a bad thing. And so I think we need to be more, to create an awareness within our children, specifically, some of the messaging that we're sending across. You see those videos on World Star Hip Hop, that promote, you know, fighting.
It's bad.
And it says that, you know, it's really, it speaks to a culture, and that's how stigmatisms and stereotypes are formed. When you see those type of aggressions, it makes bullying okay in our schools. And really the message that we need to be sending is we need to be respecting one another.
And you've seen these videos. Sometimes you've seen people sending it across other social media to where it's even gotten to you.
Yes, it's got to me on my Facebook on some of them. It is particularly in the black community where I saw young black girls, no more than the age of 5, 6, and 7, even some of them younger than that, using a series of profanity and harsh profanity. and you can
Things
hear
we can't say. Sorry, we
Yeah.
couldn't share.
And in the background, you hear the parents, or you hear some people laughing and giggling, and they think it's cute. But to the audience, or at least to myself, it's devastating to see these kids are cussing and using profanity in such combinations
That they had to have gotten some type of influence from adults.
Somebody taught them that, and it's the vulgarness is outrageous.
Okay, but now it's out of control. What can be done about it? You have social media, that's this tool. It's going rampant. It's everywhere. It's YouTube, it's Facebook, it's Instagram, like you said. What is the strategy of what we should be doing to stop it?
I think that it goes back to that educational awareness. I don't think that, we have a generation of youth that don't realize the impacts and long-term effects of some of these choices that are being made with the access that they've been provided to social media. So it starts at home, and it starts in the classroom in terms of how we send that message across to let them know what those impacts are long-term.
But I still think that's not enough, and I say that because there's such an influence, Eric, out there of television, of videos, of I don't want to name those particular video media or video where people are able to get access to those videos, but they're out there. They're raunchy. It's there.
My thing is it's a snapshot that I see of what's really going on in some people's homes, of what they actually teaching the kids, and now we seeing them act out in schools, showing violence, and also being disrespectful to each other. You getting a snapshot of a young lady is being taught how to be disrespectful, how to use the profanity, and also how to fight and carry on the way they carrying on. So now they also we seeing a snapshot, but they also broadcasting that snapshot all over Facebook, all over YouTube, all over everywhere. So to stop that, you might have to look at those entities, which is the Facebook, the YouTube, have been a block on certain material that showcase our community in that light.
So, I remember when Dr. Michael Eric Dyson talked about how do we get our young people off the streets, and he said the reason why they're in the drug game because there's nothing out there for them where they can sustain themselves. And he said, to be honest with you, some of those kids that were doing the drug game are some of the smartest kids, some of the most intelligent, but they have to make a living, an income, and that's the only way they see fit to doing it. So here we go back to access to capital and the equity values, even with jobs. I got to come back to that. Is it relating to this situation?
Well, I think we've ignored a generation of learners in terms of the summer programs that are available locally for our youth, the work ready programs that we've made available for our youth. And some of the prevention metrics that we need to be messaging to our youth are either no longer funded or they've evolved into something else that our leaders have felt is a more important need. But I feel like those are the things that we need to go back to in how we communicate. And the opportunities that are provided to our youth today.
When I was teaching, I remember this young man. He was a bright young man. I know his mom. She was a well-rounded person, she taught him some of the basic ways of life, and he was a good kid. Fast forward that a few years later, this kid is now doing a life in a penitentiary for murder of several people. I would have never thought back then that he would have that capability from that point to this point. So something happened between 8th grade and maybe 10 years later that got him to that point. I think it has to be, we have to catch them. It's like a weed. I'm using an analogy like a weed that's growing around flowers. We have to catch that weed right before it starts sprouting up and pull it out and yank it out, or put fertilizers that will kill the weeds around the plant. And right now, our youth are being killed and sabotageously killed through the systems that's set up around it. That's my opinion.
And I know that Kayinde Swazi, who is he's retired now, a professor at Fresno City College, has talked about the conditions of slavery, creating that atmosphere where there were those blocks and things we couldn't avoid. And we look at wealth in the United States, we have to deal with that reality. Yeah. That's the part that we lagged behind and had to pick up the pieces. And we picked up the pieces several times when you look at the Reconstruction period when we did that. But we still were knocked down. Unfortunately, you had those elements that were out there where there was inequity even during that Reconstruction period, where they would go and burn down towns that were thriving, African American towns. Well, look at Allensworth, here locally, if we're talking about in the Valley. And we've talked about our Black Wall Street in Oklahoma. You know, we addressed that even in Valley Black Talk Radio. So we have to maybe have an understanding of that process, and now how do we get out of that? Because I still feel like we're in this element of slavery. I still feel like there's an existence of a system, and we're not really either acknowledging it or we're not accepting it so that we can move forward and go on. Any last words or comments on that?
My last words on that is, when I was teaching math, they gave us what is called a standard, and we have to teach towards the standards. And basically what they do is they look at the results of whether the kid learned these particular standards or not. Well, that's the same thing we have to look at our community. How many black businesses are thriving? How many PhDs that got math degrees? How many PhDs that's out there in the black community? We have to have a number count, an assessment to where we can guide ourselves of whether we're making progress or not, and go from that point.
And by the way, the African American Museum addresses that during Kwanzaa, these community issues, and being able to have an outline in a process. Eric, your last word and comments about that?
I think that in order for us to create a culture to where we have a generation that's successful and that's thriving amongst our youth and our children, that they first need to be in the forefront of our conversations.
That's a good point.
And then I think that we need to create the space to have the conversations as leaders in our communities. And then I think from those conversations, we need to be doers of our words, because that's what people are listening to. What are we doing to solve these problems and these issues?
I have to agree with, and my last addition to that is churches. For me, I feel like if we have more involvement from the churches, when I look at Reverend White and the walking on the streets or getting out to the community, that part has to be a part of our community base. That has to be part of that foundation. We are a religious group, and we really believe in our churches. So I'm asking for the churches, your help to step in, from mentorship to re-education to having these programs for our youth, so that there is that value and they see that there's other ways of working with black businesses where they can get money that way and feel like it's legitimate income, so they don't have to do the street way, they don't have to do the drugs. And that's a total another program I guess we'll have to talk about, because we're down to the last few seconds of our you were going to say something.
Yeah, another thing is also maybe have some of the youth maybe come in this forum and talk of the issues over there, because we seeing it from one angle, and maybe they can express themselves from an angle that can relate to other youth.
Maybe that's part 2 of this conversation.
Yeah, this conversation's not over.
Yeah.
And it is Black History Month.
Yeah.
And we did our ONME Sunday mornings here at the African American Museum, so we're so grateful. One of our community partners here at the African American Historical Cultural Museum of the San Joaquin Valley. It's a mouthful. And you can find out more about what they're doing by going to their website. If you look on your screen, you will see that website address, so you can find out the events happening here. The upcoming event is February 25th. You are welcome to attend. The community, they are doing a CSU Fresno, a Fresno State Wall of Honor here at the African American Museum, and they're having that first planning meeting on February 25th at 5:30 p.m. here, located at 1857 Fulton Street. Well, that's it for ONME Sunday mornings. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. I'd like to to thank Eric Payne for coming on today. Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.
Thank you for tolerating us.
Good conversation.
Always a good conversation. It always goes by fast, never enough time.
Yes.
Thank you as always, Lennis Najee, for coming
Thank
on our
you.
program.
Great.
Continue to watch ONME Sunday mornings, and you can watch our online version. And until next time, we'll see you soon.
All right.
All right.